right, ladies and gentlemen, if y'all would have a seat, please. And welcome to the 7th annual Trinity Prep Author Fest. And we are so lucky this afternoon that we have Mr. James Ponti with us. He has written lots of books and done lots of cool things, and I think he's going to talk about some of that. And
I'm going to talk about the very boring development of the North Dakota mining industry. I think you're going to find it fascinating.
oh my gosh, crazy. All right, so we know that Mr. Ponti's books are all very action-packed. He has got the Dead Cities series, the Framed series, and the New York Times best-selling City Spies series that was also a summer reading pick for Good Morning America. This week, the third book in the City Spies series is officially out, and we are super excited to read what is going to happen next to Kat, Rio, Brooklyn, Paris, and Sydney in this new adventure. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Ponti.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. How you doing? Okay, so this seems, I don't even know what to make of things going on right now. So we're just going to play this by ear and see where we go. Because you guys were playing like City Spies games or something like that. So how many of you have, and it doesn't hurt my feelings if you don't raise your hand, but how many of you have read a book by me or part of a book by me? Okay, so you know a little bit about it. Okay, that's fantastic. And that's impossible to believe because I hated reading growing up. Hated it. I loved writing. I hated reading, and it's because I was really slow at it. And I tell myself I want to write books that I would have wanted to read as a kid. But then when I write them, my books turn out so much longer than I mean for them to be, and I think I would never have picked this book up so that you would read them. I really, really appreciate that. And I want this conversation, because I know the festival has changed this year because of COVID, and this is this one of, if not the only in-person part of it, right? So I want us to be able to make this what you want it to be. And if you have questions and you have things like that we want to talk about, I would be happy just talking about that the whole time and answering your questions. But I thought I would start with a little bit. And the first thing I want to talk about are words. I want to talk about words. You know the parts of speech, right? This is that kind of smart school where they know those things. Okay. Who can tell me what a noun is? Yes.
A person, place, or thing.
A noun is a person, place, or thing. That was a song we learned as a kid. Who could tell me what a verb is? Yes, right over here. An action, things you do, verb. They used to say verbs of action and verbs of being. I don't think they use that anymore. But who could tell me what an adverb is? It's a trick question. Do not use adverbs. I'm kidding. Most writers will tell you, though, adverbs are like the weak part of nothing is really big. It's gigantic. It's massive. Try not to use adverbs too much. When I think I don't like my writing, I go back and I take out all the adverbs, all the times I say the word that, and half the times I say the word smile. Because I realize that's the reaction I give most people. She smiled and said, I got to come up with better things than that. And it's frustrating when you write, coming up with that. Now I want to get back to the nouns and the verbs. There was a reason I wanted to talk about those in particular. Because it's true in writing, it's true, I think, in life. We're going to give you a little bit of the secret of life part here. The problem people have is, oh, God, that really sounds grandiose. I'm going to take another step back before I continue talking. I love to talk about writing. I love to talk about the fact that I get to write for a living. But sometimes it feels hard to talk about it without sounding like, oh, boy, don't you think you're self-important? And I don't. So don't ever take anything I say, it's just that's the thing I know about is writing. So we're going to talk about writing. And a thing that people do a lot. Because who here thinks they might want to be a writer someday? Okay. And who thinks they just like writing for fun, like poems or songs or anything? There's all kinds of ways to use writing. It's so great. We think of nouns, especially when we're growing up, especially when we're just out of college. I want to be a noun. I want to be a New York Times bestselling author. I cannot believe I am that noun. I cannot believe it. No. But that's a noun. My son wanted to be a Disney animator. And this is where I first developed this verbs versus nouns approach to life. Because I was worried, I go, that's such a specific thing. And it's okay to love that. It's okay to even want to be that. But if your goal is a noun, I want to be this thing, I want to have this thing, I want to live in this type of house, drive this car, nouns are dangerous. Because then your happiness is tied up in a thing. Verbs are awesome. And I suggest changing those goals and those dreams to verbs and not nouns. I want to be creative. I want to write. I want to meet amazing people. I want to go places that I never imagined I could be. Because those don't require a noun. If my goal was I want to be a New York Times bestselling author, I would have reached that goal 33 years after I graduated from college. Which meant for 32 years, I'd be like, man, it's never going to happen. My goal was, I want to go on adventures. I want to see places that I never imagined. And I did. I went into coal mines. I drove a cable car across San Francisco. I've written, and writing has taken me to 32 different states, 12 different countries. I've hung out with 2 presidents, Matthew McConaughey and Kevin Hart. I have met my hero in life, John Lewis, who helped lead the March on Washington and the March on Selma. And the verbs of that have been amazing. And if you pursue the verbs, you're going to be so much happier. But also, the nouns will follow. And when I wasn't looking, I'd won the Edgar Award. I'd been nominated for an Emmy Award. I'd been a New York Times bestselling author. And all those were fun things. But the verbs were the great part. I don't know if that makes sense, but I hope that makes sense to a degree. So one of the things I want you to think about, so I'm going to talk about writing. I write books, and if you ask me on the street, or although if you just walk up to a person on the street and say, how many books did you write? That's an odd leading question. I would tell you 9. But in fact, I wrote all these books, and there were other books. I tried to find them all last night. I've written a ton of books that I don't even count. And so I thought I would tell you what it means to be an author. This, it means different things. You guys have seen all these panels today. And what's really interesting about the festival here at Trinity Prep is most festivals are called book festivals. The North Texas Teen Book Festival, the National Festival of Books, and that's great. And we talk about books, and we go and we talk about books. And here you call it the Author Festival. And I think that's really interesting. And the authors come, or we have the panels, and we talk about books. But I thought, well, maybe we'll talk about authors a little bit, and what it means, and what you think it means versus what it actually means. This week, I have got to talk to quite a few interesting authors. If you saw earlier, I talked to Carl Hiaasen. Actually, I think we taped that last week or the week before. Carl Hiaasen happens to be one of my 2 favorite authors in the world. So that was a big deal. Tuesday night, I had an event with Kwame Mbalia, who writes Tristan Strong, Punch the Hole in the Sky. And Kwame and I just talked books for an hour for the Cleveland Public Library. Wednesday night, I went out to dinner with Pam Munoz-Ryan and Cristina Diaz-Gonzalez, 2 great writers. And we had so much fun talking about books while Christina's husband, the lawyer, had no idea what we were talking about. And we were talking about the things writers talk about when they're together, which is, have you ever had a bookstore event when you go to the bookstore and nobody comes? And it's like, uh-huh. And that's the real, like right now, if it wasn't for COVID, I would be on a 2-week book tour of the country. I was supposed to do that. 2 weeks. And in November, it got harder to plan. And when Omicron came and it looked like COVID might surge again, a lot of the schools were getting worried. And it became virtual, and then it went from virtual to a week of driving around Florida. So you are my 19th school this week that I've been to. And if you say, oh, I'm going on a 2-week tour around the country to talk about my books, that sounds wonderful and glamorous. And I know the first time I heard that, I'm like, oh, wow. And it is. It's great. But mostly it's wake up at 4 a.m., be at the airport by 5 a.m., fly to Atlanta, visit 3 schools, go back to the airport that night, fly to St. Louis, and maybe at midnight you can eat Chipotle in your hotel. It's not glamorous. And you do that for 2 weeks. I had a writer friend say the only thing worse than being on tour is not being on tour, because then you think, oh my goodness, my books are no good. So at least you go out there. So my writing career started in second grade. Second grade, I wrote a story about Mickey Mouse having a birthday party. And it was a very strange story for a second grader to write, because the whole concept of the story was that all the characters got together and they bought Mickey Mouse a lamp. And this was my second grade story. And I think the teacher called my mom in and said, okay, so it's good writing, but lamp seems like an odd choice for a 7-year-old to make for a birthday party for Mickey Mouse. But I was hooked. I liked it. I like story writing. Then, and how many of you had seen me speak in person before? Okay, I don't. You see, I worry about repeating stories. I don't want to repeat stories to you. I'm not going to tell the haircut story. No, the poem story I was maybe going to tell. Who's heard the poem story before? All right, so I apologize. I'll tell it fast. 5th grade, we have a poetry unit. Now, I'm a terrible reader because I'm a slow reader, and I'm frustrated. And all throughout elementary school, whenever we had to read a book, whenever we had to read anything, I never finished. I never got to the end. And so I never got to really have the full conversation because I was making up the parts about the ending. Then one day, my teacher says, we are going to learn all about poetry. And I was kind of bummed. Oh, this sounds awful. And it was amazing. He had this great voice. He read the poem. It sounded like music. It was perfect. He said, when you read poetry, you've got to read really slow. And I thought, well, that's not a problem because I read everything really slow. And that, you have to read each word out in your head. But I looked at the poems, and like the entire poem fit on a page or 2 pages. And finally, I could finish. I could be part of the whole conversation. And again, I was a good student, but not in language arts. One time, 3rd grade, I get my report card. I got all A's and a C in English. And I tell my friend, I don't understand this. I got a C in English. It's the only language I speak. And he said, what? I said, I don't ever speak any other languages, and I never cuss at school. How did I get a C? And he said, English is the name of the class that we take with Ms. Wilson. And I went, oh. And then I thought, if I don't know the name of the class, a C's pretty good probably. I probably could have done a lot worse than that, right? But for the first time now in language arts, I'm getting to the end and I'm loving it. So we're reading these poems and I'm getting to the end of the poems, and it's so much fun. And then he says, well, now I want everyone to write a poem of their own. Each of you is going to write a poem. So, okay, I'm excited. Can I do this? And I start to write a poem, and I write a poem called Stars. And he collects them, and then he says the most terrifying thing I ever heard. He says, now I'm going to read your poetry out loud. And I'm like, you're a traitor, Mr. Brothrow. I don't want you to read my poetry out loud. What if it's awful? What if I think it's rhymes, but it doesn't rhyme because I don't know how to pronounce the word properly? And then he held up another stack of papers and he said, but I'm also going to read these poems. These are some of the greatest poems ever written. I'm going to shuffle the 2 stacks of paper together and put them on my desk so you can't tell what stack I'm reading from. And I'm going to read a poem, and when I'm done, you have to guess who wrote it. Could be your classmate, could be a famous poet. So he does that. He shuffles the stack together, and he reads the first poem. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch these woods fill up with snow. Well, snow was a dead giveaway. No one from Atlantic Beach, Florida wrote that poem. And it was really good. No way a 5th grader wrote that poem. So we guessed all the great poets. Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost. Yes, it's Robert Frost. Then he got to the next one. My name is Pat. I own a cat. It's really fat. How about that? Well, that sounds more like a 5th grade poem. And we have a kid named Pat in class, so we'll guess Pat. And he kept going, and then he got to my poem. My poem was called Stars. And I do not remember how it goes, but I remember exactly what happened when he read it. He read Stars to the class. He said, "Who wrote that?" And a girl raised her hand and answered Shakespeare. And it's the only time anyone guessed a real poet for one of our poems. And the coolest man I ever met, my laugh smiled and said, "No, it was James." And then he looked at me, and this is exactly what he said. "James, someone thought something you wrote was written by the greatest writer in history. How does that make you feel?" That was 45 years ago. In room 123 at Atlantic Beach Elementary School on Sherry Drive in Atlantic Beach, Florida. And I know all those specifics because that's the moment I became a writer. I never wanted to be anything else from that moment on. I wanted to write because I wanted to feel like that as often as I could. And so I was determined, but I didn't know what I was going to write because I'm not going to write books. I can't read books. I don't think there's enough poetry out there to make a living. I don't know. I wasn't Amanda Gorman. I mean, there was limits to my poetic skills. So I just knew that I wanted to be a writer. Thought I might want to be a newspaper writer. And then, I don't even know if there are newspapers anymore that you guys know about, but journalists write articles. And then we didn't have much money when I was growing up. We didn't have an air conditioner until I was 13. And it gets hot in Florida. And I complain when I get hot. And so in the summer sometimes my mom would let me go to the movies by myself at an age way too young to let a kid go to the movies by themselves. But I was the third baby. I was the third one. And by the time the third one comes around, all your safety rules are out the window. So I'd say, "Mom, can I go to the movies?" And she'd be, "Fine, here." Movies were cheaper then because I could walk to the movie theater without crossing a major road, which actually, in retrospect, the road I took was far more dangerous than the major road. It's like all these dark alleys and like a rabbit farm and all this stuff. And I'd go to the movies. I would usually go to the first movie of the day, 11:30, 11 o'clock, because I loved it. Because what happened is, if you leave the air conditioner on all night, when there aren't people generating body heat, it gets really cold in the theater in the morning. And I love that. And I'd walk in there, and it'd be really cold. I'd sit right in that front middle seat. Sometimes no one else would come for that first movie, or only a couple people, but I didn't even see them. I just sat there, cool air conditioning, maybe got a Coke, maybe got some popcorn, and I watched the movie. And unlike books, it wasn't faster for anyone else. The movie was the same length for everyone, hour and a half to 2 hours long. Yeah. I went to every movie. I remember I went to a movie called Viva Knievel. It was about the daredevil, Evel Knievel, who used to do jumps on his motorcycle. And I was literally the only person in the theater. So I kept moving around, and I'd sit in the middle, and I'd yell out. I'd just like yell out like it was my house. I go, "Could you stop it so I can go to the bathroom?" Right? I loved them all. I loved all the movies. And if the movie was really good, I would stay in my seat and I would watch it again. I'd watch it back to back. And that was important for a reason I didn't know at the time. But because I had already seen the movie, because I knew how it turned out, when I saw it the second time, I started to learn how they made it. Like, oh, they're saying he's left-handed. They're saying that now because later on, that's important. And I began to understand movies much better than friends my age. And then I got to middle school, and I had this great teacher in middle school who loved movies. He was my English teacher for 3 years in a row. And he had us make a movie in class every year. And we had a film festival, and we compete with 4 other schools around our county. And every year I wrote the movie. And I thought, oh, this is the thing. Then one year I went up to him, like 9th grade. I said, "Mr. Tyree, I love writing a class movie. I think this might be the thing I'm going to do. I think what I want to do is write movies or plays. And without hesitation, he said, write a play. We'll produce it. I'm like, what? He said, if you write a play, we'll make it for your whole school. The whole school, we'll produce it. He didn't ask permission. He didn't check with my mom. He didn't check with the principal. And I took him at his word, and I went, and I wrote the worst play ever. I think it was called, I can't remember. I think it was called Santa Sleigh 79. And it was like the terror movies like Airplane 79 and stuff. It was about Santa on Christmas Eve, and his sleigh is taken hostage by Middle Eastern terrorists. It had Santa Claus, it had machine guns, it had the President of the United States. The whole stage was the sleigh. There are elves. It was everything. It was ridiculous. But we produced it, and kids came, and it was so silly they would laugh. And I was sitting behind the curtains, and I saw, and I thought, oh, okay. It's like at the movie. I made up the joke. I wrote down the joke, and now they're laughing at it. I can do this. 11th, okay, so where should I pick up now? Okay, we'll jump to college. So I go to college. I go to college to major in screen. Actually, I'm sorry. Someone over here had a question, and I didn't get to it yet. You know? Oh. No, they did not stop the movie for me. It would have been nice, but they didn't care that I was. They couldn't believe that I actually was watching Viva Knievel, which I will say is one of the worst movies of all time. There's a reason I was alone when I was in there. Yes. Ponti and a Pontiac? No, we did not have that. My family didn't have much money, so we used to drive Ford Pintos. Now, the funny thing about that is the Ford Pinto was made with a mistake, and it blew up if you got hit from behind. So they were really cheap to buy. So my mom would buy it, and we're like, but it's going to blow up, Mom. Because it doesn't matter. We won't get in an accident, right? No, we never had a Pontiac. I always wanted one so I could say, Ponti and a Pontiac. Okay, back to, where was I? Okay, college. So in college, I majored in screenwriting, and that's what I studied all year. It was great. Just like I knew, I figured out in middle school the writing I wanted to do was screenwriting. And I majored in screenwriting, went to school in Los Angeles, the University of Southern California, great film school. It was wonderful. I went to school with like famous people that, like I didn't know him, but like I guess I was at a party with Will Ferrell and like people like that. They were like, just the film program had a lot of people that, they weren't famous then, they later became famous, right? And every summer I worked at Disney World. And at Disney World, I was Davy Crockett, and I wore a coonskin cap, and I stood in the front of a 1,600-pound canoe, and people would have to paddle. It's like the jungle. It's like the poor man's Jungle Cruise. Right? They got rid of the ride, partly because of me. But I think maybe, I don't know. I had an accident, and people went in the water. It was not good. But anyway, we're going around, and we would go around the river, and I would tell jokes. And I had to tell the same jokes thousands of times over those 3 summers. And that sounds awful. It was great because I got to change them and figure out how they work, because I had a new audience every 20 minutes. Okay, let's try it again. But now I'm going to change the way. I'll give you an idea. These were the worst dad jokes kind of things you could imagine. There's one place on the river where there's a cabin and it's on fire. And you come around just past Big Thunder Mountain, and up ahead there's a fire on the right. And this is you go, all right, everyone, up ahead on your right-hand side, you'll see a cabin. Totally ignore the fire, right? You don't talk about the fire. You'll see a cabin up there. Makes me kind of sad. That's my girlfriend's house. Well, technically we broke up, so she's my old flame. Right? And then you get, oh. Right, so I tell that a couple hundred times. I'm like, well, I could do better than that. So up ahead, folks, on the right-hand side, if you look, you'll see a cabin. Well, it's not just any cabin. That's where my girlfriend lives. But we broke up the other day, and, well, now she's my old flame. Moan, moan, moan. You know, she used to work here, but she got fired. Moan, moan, moan. And then you go, I tell you something, though, guys, and you got to trust me on this. She is really hot. And and then and I learned how to tell jokes better and how to write jokes better. Yeah. I never told the same ones again. I had this thing where I was full of myself. I said, there's not, we used to call them a crew. Like, I said, there's not a crew you can find that I can't make laugh on the river. Because it was a really hot, annoying ride. And this was the challenge for 3 years. And then one year they came up and they, okay, James, you're taking the next crew out. And it was a crew of 16 people who only spoke Chinese except for one person. They said, come back with them laughing and then we'll know. And I go, okay, I cannot, in a school environment, tell you what I did to get these people to laugh. But the one person who could translate for me gave me some information. I worked with it. And by the time we came back around the river, they were laughing so hysterically. And, you know, so no, you just muddle through it. You figure it out. And that's the great thing. And that's what I mean about verbs. When I applied for my job, I wanted to be a Jungle Cruise skipper because I remember the Jungle Cruise, and you get in your microphone and you tell the same jokes, and you have to follow the script, and you have to tell the same joke every single time. And I would have hated that. But it's like, no, canoes, little outlaws, yeah, I can handle that. So you're always looking for things. So I graduated from school. I got married. I got to make a living, right? We got to have to figure this out. So when I was 24, maybe 25, I had an idea for a book, The History of Movies in Florida, because I had a film degree and I knew about Florida. And there was a publishing company connected to the Sentinel called Tribune Publishing. And I found out the name of the guy there who picked the people who could write the books. And I sent him my idea. And I didn't hear from him, and I knew I wouldn't. But 2 weeks later, I called him up. His name was George. He actually later became a friend. At the beginning, he did not like me. I called George up, and I said, hi, my name's James Ponti. I sent you this thing. Oh, yeah, I got that. I haven't had a chance. Oh, I understand. I just wanted to touch base with you and tell you I'm going to call you again. And every 3 weeks, I called him. Every 3 weeks, I was polite. And every 3 weeks, I said, and he hadn't gotten to it. And I said, but don't worry, I'll call back. And 3 weeks, and 3 weeks, and 3 weeks. I knew he would stop taking my calls, so I would lie about who I was. My cousin George works there. Oh, your cousin, I'll connect you to him. I go, hey, George, it's James Ponti. And, and finally, when I knew he was at the end, when I knew he was at the edge, I said, hey, George, this is James Ponti, and I know you don't want to hear my voice. So I'm going to offer you a deal. I don't know where I came up with this. I said, I'm going to offer you a deal. If you'll talk to me in person for 10 minutes, I promise never to call you again the rest of my life. And he said, I feel like I owe you at least 10 minutes. Because I had now called him like 20 times, right? I felt like, so I came in. I was so broke that I debated how many quarters to put into the parking meter in front of the Sentinel. Because I thought, if you don't believe in yourself and you only put one in, that only buys you 20 minutes. If you put 3 in, but you're back in 20 minutes, that's 50 cents you can't have back, right? I mean, we were broke, which you're at the start. That's fine. And so I put 2 quarters in. And I got to the seat, and I told myself, I don't care if they tow the car. There's only 2 ways I'm leaving this building. With a contract or in handcuffs. I mean, that's it. And 2 hours later, I left with a contract. And that's this book. And my mom was happy, and my wife was happy, and my old English teachers were happy, and I was happy. You could go to Barnes & Noble and it would be there. But it didn't lead to anything else. Then my TV career took off. I wrote for the Mickey Mouse Club on Disney Channel. I moved to the show called The Mystery Files of Shelby Woo, which was a show at Nickelodeon. It was a mystery show. And there's 2 writers on the show. It was me and a woman named Suzanne. And the books, the show was doing well enough. They decided to have a book series based on the show. And Suzanne and I talked to our network executive, and said, oh, we want to get to write books. Each of us wants to write one of the books. And he looked at us and said, James, Suzanne, you can't write the books. You're not real writers. You're TV writers. It's devastating. It's like, what are you talking about? It's not a real. And we begged and we harped on it. And finally he said, okay, enough. I talked to the publisher. They said this, write 4 chapters and send that in. And if they like it, they'll let you write a book. So I wrote 4 chapters and I sent it in. Suzanne wrote 4 chapters and sent it in, and they let us write. That's this book. And then they asked me to write more. And I wrote 2 more. Short, they're what, like 125 pages? And I thought it was like the longest thing in the world. 132 pages. I thought I was going to die. They didn't ask Suzanne to write any more books. They only asked me to write more books. And I was awful about it. I come into work, I go, oh, Suzanne, you must not be very good at writing books, right? Because, I'm now on my 3rd one, and you're still on your 1st one. It's a good thing we make a living writing TV shows and not books, because you'd be hungry. And it's really funny when you realize Suzanne's last name is Collins. So she wrote Gregor the Overlander, and after 5 of those, she wrote The Hunger Games. It sold like 120 million copies. And I went to the movie premieres with her for the Hunger Games movies. And when I'm at the movies, I'm like, but you know, Suzanne, when it was Shelby Woo, I was better than you. So then I'm trying to make a living as a TV writer, and then it dries up. One night, it's dry. And it's October. And I'm sorry, I hope I'm not boring you guys. This is the life of a writer, and I will speed it up, and then we'll get to questions. But I thought I'm willing to give up my writing career. It's been 10 years. I tried my best. I made a living a bit, but I need to take care of my family. So I tried to get a teaching certificate, and I didn't qualify for one because my degree was too strange. And I thought, I have no skill. The only thing I know how to do, and so late at night, if you want a supportive spouse, I really recommend marrying a teacher. Teachers are great. But if you want a really supportive spouse, marry an elementary school teacher. Elementary school teachers are, yeah, you could do it. That's amazing. I married a high school teacher. High school teachers are a little more blunt and honest. So late one night, my wife's is trying to fall asleep. She has to wake up at 5 the next morning. I'm panicked because it's October, and I know there's no TV shows going to hire me at least till the new year. I don't know if I'm ever going to find a job again. And I have an idea for a book based on when I worked at Disney World. And I told my wife, I said, I have an idea. I'm going to write a book. And my wife looked at me, and without missing a beat said, try to read one first and see how that goes before you try to write one. But I did. I called my friend who had edited these books, and I said, is there anyone at Simon & Schuster who would read a manuscript if I sent it? He said, oh, this woman named Bethany Book, and Bethany Book will read what you write. And I go, great, what does she publish? She goes, romantic comedies for high school girls. I'm like, oh, that's great, because I know nothing about any of those things. But I came up with my idea, and I sent it in, and I had to write 3 books under the name as though I was a woman, because apparently they didn't think high school girls wanted to learn about romance from an overweight, middle-aged, bald man who had no idea what high school romance is like. So I wrote Animal Attraction, Sea of Love, Prama, then an Alan Strange book and a Raven book, then Camp Rock books, then books based on the Santa Claus movies. books based on the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, books based on Tron, another Pirates of the Caribbean, The Prince of Persia. One year, then my son decided to go to private school, so these are the tuition books. I would just say yes to anything they asked. So I wrote the novelizations of A Christmas Carol, Sorcerer's Apprentice, G-Force, The Prince of Persia, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger's Tide, all like in a couple months. And you know what? I've never seen any of these movies. They didn't have the movie. They just send you the script and you make it up, right? You know, I'm just making it up. And then one day I decided, you know what? I really like it. So I could have been frustrated by all these kind of jobs that were not what but I learned how to write faster, and I learned how to write different, and I learned how to make the dialogue better, and I learned how to make the plot better. And I had done all these things, and Suzanne's like, James, you're really good at writing books. Write a book. Like, really focus on trying to write a book. So one day I took my son to school, and I don't know why, I was looking at the dumpster. I dropped him off, got back in my car to drive to work. And while looking at the dumpster, I had an idea. Actually, I was going to write another one of these romantic comedies. And the idea was I needed to describe the plot in 2 paragraphs. That's how they would buy it. Girl, and I came up with this idea. Okay, girl at a science magnet school. And this is how shameless I am. I said it at a science magnet school because the editor went to a science magnet high school. She went to Bronx Science. And I thought, when she reads it, she'll say, that's my life on the page, right? And my idea was a girl at a science magnet school who didn't understand why people fall in love, so she wanted to do a project on the chemistry of falling in love. But I needed, in the description, I needed a name for the school. And because I don't believe in repeating words in 2 paragraphs, I needed a name. I had in my summary, I mentioned the school 3 times. So I needed to be able to call it 3 different things. The name of the school, the word school, and a nickname. So I came up with the Metropolitan Institute in Science and Technology, whose initial spell MIST. So one time I do the school name, one time I do MIST, and then I just say school. And I looked at the dumpster, and I told myself, you know what? I like MIST as the name of a school better than I like the plot. So I just threw it all out, and I said, what happened to the school called MIST? And that became what I call my first book. That's Dead City. It's set at that school. Now, you think, oh, this is great. Now I finally got it. I got a hardcover book. It comes out in paperback. By the time the first one came out, the second one was already done, and I was already convinced publisher didn't believe in it. Nothing was going to happen. So I started coming up with a new idea, and that new idea was Framed. And then Framed started getting some notice, and Framed started getting nominated for awards, and that led to a couple others. And then my son was, so I wrote Framed, then I wrote Vanished, which is the second book of the series. And the day I finished Vanished was on a Friday before spring break. My wife is a teacher. My son was in school in England. And our decision was, what we were going to do was, she was going to come home from school, and we were going to fly to England and spend a week in England, in London and Paris. My wife has never been this excited in her life. She's always wanted to go to Europe. Here we're going to go to Europe. But I have to finish Vanished. She left for school that morning. She sees me at my computer, and she says, why are you up so early? And I said, I'm not up early. I'm up late. She goes, what? You haven't been to sleep? I have to finish this book before we get on a plane because it's overdue, and we're going to be in Europe for 8 days. I'm not going to be able to finish there. It can't be another 9 days late. So I have to finish this book today. She says, well, get it done. She goes to Winter Park. She teaches all day at Winter Park, comes back home. When she comes home, I'm wearing the same clothes. I'm in the same position. She goes, what is going on here? I go, Mom, almost done. And she says, at least you've packed. I go, I haven't packed. I haven't showered. I haven't done anything. And we were flying that day. We weren't flying the next day. And she goes, well, In 2 hours, I'm leaving for the airport. I'm going to Europe, which I've waited to do my whole life. Whether you come with me or not is up to you. So I wrote the last chapter of Vanished in about 12 minutes. True. Not one word was used. It totally got rewritten. But I got to the end. I send. I jump in the shower. I pack my clothes, race to the airport. We get on the plane, and we fly across the ocean overnight, wake up the next morning, and we're in London, and it's great. And even though I'm on vacation, I can't stop writing. It's impossible. That's my job. That's what I do. And I have just finished a book the day before, so I can't keep working on the book I've worked on for the last 7 months. So it's time to write the new book. So as we're walking around London, I said, frame 3, they'll come to London. And over the 3 days in London, I come up with the whole plot. Florian and Margaret, for anyone who's read the book, it's Christmas vacation. So they go to London for the Sherlock Society. The people meet at Sherlock Holmes' museum, and they have this meeting every year, and there's a mystery, and it's all these avid mystery buffs. And then someone disappears, and they have to solve it, right? So I'm like, this is great. Not only that, because if I write that book, I can deduct this trip off my taxes, because this is now research. And then we're in Paris. And then I go, oh, this is great. And my wife in Paris is like, oh, look at it. It looks just like Paris. And I'm like, it is Paris. She goes, no, but it looks like it, right? Half the places you go to, they don't look like you think, or only, this looks gorgeous in every direction. I thought, okay, I got to add Paris to the book. So Florian and Margaret go to London, then they go to Paris, and then as I'm flying back a couple of days later, I'm like, that sounds like a really bad book. Because, you know, on TV shows, like when I was growing up, the Brady Bunch, you knew it was bad when, for 3 episodes, they go to the Grand Canyon or they go to Hawaii. And it's like they've run out of stories. I can't, in the 3rd book, abandon everything I've done in the first 2 books. I have to do something else. So that next weekend, we go to the mall, Altamont Mall. My wife is going to Macy's. I do not want to go to Macy's. All I do at Macy's is stand outside the dressing room and hold my wife's purse like this. So we enter the mall through the Barnes & Noble, and I say, you know what, I'm going to stay here. And she said, are you looking for a book? I said, no. I'm going to come up with a new book series. She goes, what? I said, well, we just took the most expensive trip of our life. I have to figure out how to pay for that. So maybe if I sell a new book, that'll help pay for it. I was joking and all. She goes, okay, yeah, all right, come up with a new book series in 20 minutes. I'll be back. And so I stood there at the edge of the kids' department, and I looked at all the books, and I asked myself, what's missing? And I saw all these books with faces. Who was Albert Einstein? Who was Amelia Earhart? All these faces, faces, faces. And I thought about the trip and that picture on my phone of my wife and son in front of the Eiffel Tower. And I thought, I know what I want in my book. I want places. Okay, who goes to these places? Spies would travel around the world. Okay, spies. Okay, I want a group of spies. Okay, a group. And I want them to be like a family, because I want it to really be the story of how these kids become a family with all these missions. Okay, how am I going to tell them apart? Because it's so hard when you're reading a book with that many main characters to keep track of who's who. And I go, I have an idea. This is literally all in the 20 minutes while my wife is at Macy's. They'll call themselves out of the name of their cities. That will be the code name. One's from Paris, he'll be Paris. One's from wherever, he'll be Sydney. I think Sydney and Paris were the first 2 I came up with. And my wife comes back, and we walk to the car, and she's like, okay, so tell me, did you come up with a new book series? And we sat in the car, and I said, you know, I think I did. It's called City Spies. That's what I said. Doesn't normally happen that way. And 2 years later, after I finished Framed and after we did City Spies, it came out, I come to this school with my brand new book, City Spies. We're in the Black Box Theater. I'm visiting 5 schools around the city. Some of you may have been there. And that is Monday. And then I go to Atlanta and St. Louis, and COVID is chasing me across the country. And by the time I get to Denver, I get a call saying, tour is done. You've got to go back home. Now, my book was supposed to come out a week later, and we moved it up. And if it had come out a week later, it would have been lost in COVID. But I got out, and I got to enough schools. Kids got to see it. Week after that, I don't know how well you remember those first weeks of COVID. It was exhausting. We're always tired. My wife comes back from someplace, and she's like, she's going to take a nap. And she goes to lay down to take a nap. I thought, you know what, I could use a nap. And I lay down to take a nap. And my phone rings. And it's my editor to tell me that I'm a New York Times bestselling author. And I'm trying not to wake up my wife. So I'm like, hello, what is it? And then my wife's like, what's going on? And I go, honey, we made the bestseller list. And she starts screaming. And that's how I became an overnight success 40 years after I wrote through all these Mickey Mouse's Lamp and girls' romantic comedies and gerbil movies that I've never seen. And I loved every minute of it. And I love that I get to come and talk to students like you and readers like you. And you will never, I hope you get to feel like I feel if one of you comes and says, oh, I really like your book, and oh, I read this, or some kids come and say, I really like the book with the ending, but I'm fixing it and I'll send it to you, you know. That these stories in my head exist for you. And sometimes, have I just talked forever? I have, haven't I? What time? Oh my goodness, it's late. And then sometimes I get the most amazing mail. Oh, my son has leukemia and we can't leave the hospital room. And the only happy thing we've had this month is we've read all your books aloud in a row. I mean, how's that possible? And I go back to 5th grade and Mr. Prother saying, tell me, James, how does that make you feel? And I hope you get to feel that way too, because it's great. And you make me feel that way, and it's such an honor to be here. Thank you guys so much. I really talked forever. I didn't mean to. Do we want to do questions? You see, I normally have a presentation. I know how long that lasts. And I just started talking, and I didn't mean to do that. I talked a long time. Awesome. Do we have any questions? Does anyone have any questions? If not, that's all right. Yeah, right here. How do you deal with writer's block? Okay, think of writer's block this way. Most people think writer's block is, I don't have any ideas. I think writer's block is more like this. You will experience this in high school, in college, and especially in your early 20s. 4 friends are together. Where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. Where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. Where do you want to go to dinner? It's not that there aren't places to go. There are plenty of places to go. You just can't tell. None of them excite you. None of you make you feel like that's the one. That's what writer's block is. You got a bunch of ideas, but none of them are, oh, spaghetti sounds awesome. Let's go for that. Now, I think of writing as a car trip. You start here, and you know you're going there. We're driving to Washington, D.C., but we don't want to take 95 the whole time. That's boring. So we're going to take some other roads, and we're going to do some adventures. But sometimes you go, wow, this adventure is not good. And now we're getting further off track. And what you do is you pull the car over, check the GPS, Google search a little, and maybe go back to the previous turn. And that's what I do with writer's block. I've taken a wrong turn, so before I go too far astray, let's go back and see where the problem really began and see what's not working. You have to figure out what's not working. Sometimes writer's block is frustrating. Sometimes writer's block is your very intelligent brain saying, stop doing this. Yeah. From bigger authors? No. Authors are the friendliest people. So here, I'll give you an example. I have a Tuesday night Zoom group. It is Stuart Gibbs, who writes Spy School, Gordon Corman, who's written 99 books, Max Brallier, who writes Last Kids on Earth, Christina Soon-Tornvat, who won 2 Newbery Awards last year. Karina Young Glazer, Sarah Mlinowski, all these, and all we do is basically get on the phone and cheer each other up and pep each other up. So no, I do sometimes get really rough reviews on Goodreads or Amazon, and you're not supposed to read those. And it's just like, this is my favorite, and I get this regularly, and every kid writer I know gets this. I guess this book's okay if you're a kid, but I'm 45, so I found it boring. And I want to say, okay, you know what? Yeah, it's not for you. Don't give me a 2-star review. You know, that's like going to the restaurant and say, yeah, the kids' meal is blah. You know, it's like, they don't order the kids' meal. I know a writer, I won't say his name, but it rhymes with Stuart Gibbs, who sometimes will track people on Amazon down and say, I can't believe you gave me this review based on what you said in the review. And I tell him, Stu, buddy, you have got to lay off. You've just got to let go because you're poking the bear. Yeah, over here. No, I've never put that together. But here's the funny thing. So my brother wrote a story in the 2nd grade, and the title of the story was How I Escaped the Iron Curtain. I wrote a story in the 2nd grade. It was Mickey Mouse getting a lamp. My brother grew up to be a U.S. diplomat, a U.S. ambassador, and was stationed in Moscow. I grew up to write on the Mickey Mouse Club, where one of my assignments was to write the episode that celebrated Mickey Mouse's 65th birthday. And I'm like, dude, I wrote this in 2nd grade. I am on top of it. So I guess what you write in 2nd grade is your future, whether you know it or not. Yeah. Good. Favorite book and writer's tip? My favorite book is from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Baisley Frankweiler. My good writer tip is this. This is the secret. This is the easiest fix to improve your writing. Read everything you write out loud. Every writer I know reads everything out loud. And you can hear it. You hear the grammar mistakes. You hear the story. You hear the pace. Your eyes and brains will play tricks on you, and you'll think it's better because you fix it. But when you have to go so slow as to say it and hear it, you catch the mistakes. Yeah. I am writing City Spies 4 right now before this session. Actually, while I was here today, I just got a picture of the cover of the 4th book. So I showed that to them, but I can't really show it all around. But yeah, no, 4. I plan to write 7 of them, 7 or 8 or more. I mean, Stuart's written 9 spy school books, so maybe I'll try to match that. Yeah. Frame 3? That it was next. So what ended up happening is I decided to create a new series next. So I went back and then I wrote Frame 3 before I wrote City Spies. I just wrote the first 40 pages of City Spies to show my editor and my agent so they could decide on a contract. Something else that I haven't told many people, starting in 2 years, I'll have 2 books a year. So every spring, a City Spies book will come out. And every fall, I have a new series. I'll tell you the first paragraph from memory to give you an idea what the series is like. If our name had been Baker, we would have sold cupcakes. If our name was Walker, we would have taken care of people's pets when they were out of town. But our name is Sherlock, so detective agencies seem like the thing to do. It's called the Sherlock Sisters. It's about 2 girls who live in Miami, and they end up investigating the cases their grandfather wrote about for the newspaper. Yeah. Okay. Has anyone here read Vanished? Vanished has in it a secret society based at the Smithsonian, which was originally a whole book series idea I had that I decided not to do. So that didn't pan out, and I was trying to think of something. I thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to go with the Megatherium Society, and I'm going to lift that here, and I'm going to drop it right in. Yeah. How did I pick the cities? Okay. So when I knew that I wanted to name the characters after the cities, I had a whole process that I had to go through. I created, so here's the thing. You can't just use any city. It can't be, hey, Altamont Springs, come with me. Sure thing, Kissimmee, I'm on my way, right? So I wanted city names that sounded like they could be people names. So I looked that up and made a list, and I made a list of like 50 or 60 cities. Then I wanted each kid to be from a different continent. So that narrowed it down. There were only a couple cities in South America that I liked Rio from the beginning. Cat was a good name for Kathmandu, and I really liked the idea of the religious and the history there for her. For the U.S., I had 5 names, I think 5 or 6. The character was either going to be Brooklyn, Charlotte, Austin, Dallas, or Savannah. It was going to be a boy or girl, I wasn't sure. And then I just picked the ones, narrowed it down, and picked the ones that I liked. Last question, you pick who it is. No. The play I wrote in middle school was awful. It was, but it was, I mean, it was fun. But no, I don't go back. I do want, the only thing to go back on, so in 2 weeks, there is a Spy School graphic novel coming out, and it looks really amazing. I would love to do a Dead City graphic novel. I think that would be great. But no, I keep moving in the straight direction. So, okay. You guys have been awesome. Let me see what time it is. I have to be at the Winter Park Public Library by 6. That gives me a little time if you want me to sign things, if you want to do whatever, pictures. Thank you guys. Don't rush, don't rush. We'll be here. Oh, thank you so much. Of course, yeah. I don't know that I stay organized. I try. I think my wife would laugh at that. I just write notes out. I keep the calendar open on my desk. And, weeks like this are